So first of all, Shashank, it's always lovely to be speaking to you, and it's a pleasure to have you, not only for this, but for the event that's coming up as well. So Nayaka, the Hero's Perspective, is happening on May 31st here in Austin.
I'm also very excited to be dancing in this program. Thank you, Akshani, for inviting me. I'm a Bharatanatyam dancer from Dallas. Currently, I live in Austin, and I've learned from my mother for the past 17 or something years, Vani Iswara, and over the past maybe year and a half, I've also been learning with Shijit Nampia. By the time that I was born, Amma had already established her school here in Dallas, and so growing up, I was always surrounded by dance and also by music, and so it was just something that was like that always kind of was around me. And I had an older brother, Aditya, who was also learning dance, and so it was inevitable that at some time, I think when I was four, Amma formally started taking like my class at home. Um, but even before that, I think like just whenever I would come home from school, or like I said, that time preschool, I would always just sit in Amma's dance studio and watch classes and or listen. Even if I wasn't sitting there, sitting downstairs, we'd hear the music, and so all of that, the like that this like intuitive sense and appreciation for the dance form, I think, was ingrained in me and my brothers very early on. I mean, I've heard from some other people who have also learned from their mothers or their parents that there have been some problems, but personally, I haven't really experienced any of that, and I think all credit goes to Amma. And I think the main reason is that for both me and for Aditya, I think she took a kind of not hands-off approach, but she kind of let us like be our own children and grow up and and wasn't so like strict and like very like specific that we need to do this then and do like as soon as you come home from school you have to practice for this many hours when we were like 9 or 10 or something. I'm sure there are also benefits to doing that, but I think one nice thing about that is it allowed me to sort of take time to develop my own relationship and appreciation for the art form, to then want to like put in that effort once I was a bit older. And another like just I think lovely thing about having my mother as my guru is that a lot of I think many like artists and many people I've heard say this thing about how in the you only learn maybe like 20. I think I'm gonna make up the numbers right now, but this you learn 20% from the classroom or from your teacher, and then you 20% from your practices and 20% from watching programs, and the other what is that? Other 40% will come from somewhere else. And I think especially living in the house of a dancer and living with Amma, there's so much like learning and sort of just things that you intuitively pick up or you figure out just through conversations outside of dance class or like in the car rides or talking to her after going to a program. Because like for instance, I know that a lot of times, especially when I was younger, it's very difficult to completely understand what's going on in a Bharatanatyam program, right? Like people who aren't dancers who aren't familiar with the art form oftentimes have difficulty understanding all the specifics, right? But having Amma sitting there right next to me, and every time I would have a doubt, I would tap her on the shoulder and say, "What does that line mean? What is she doing there? What's happening?" I think that was always very helpful. And I think and another thing too is that my my mother was always like very a big influence on me as a dancer, but also specifically my dad too is very interested, very knowledgeable about Carnatic music, and so just the same similar thing talking to him and like him like forcing us to when I was younger, forcing us to listen to music in car rides and stuff, and telling us about the ragams and the different sangatis, and it gave me a very strong foundation in music as well, along with dance, and I think
Mhm.
having both of those in our family was very one really nice thing about Dallas having such a strong community for like Indian classical arts is that without fail, every year we would have a number of like really great artists coming to town, right?
Yeah.
And and I think that more than anything is like is like because like watching programs, watching kacheris and going to dance programs is incredibly important to like to learn
Yeah.
about what the art form is and get new ideas and be inspired, right? And so, like my entire life, basically, like every Saturday and Sunday, there's always in the evening, some program happening in Dallas. We didn't go every weekend, but often, like most of my Saturdays and Sundays, I recall at some point it would end up in some kacheri, some concert, at some temple or program. And when I was younger, admittedly, like I would fall asleep in them because it's you're a kid and you're young and you're tired and you haven't learned how to appreciate the music or the program in front of you. But I think even those like those years of like falling asleep in the concerts or just being still being forced to be there and being surrounded in that environment was very important in like in giving me an appreciation for art, for music and dance and everything. I was always very interested in dance and I liked doing it, but I was kind of just doing what I was told, right? And I was just following that path. But then I remember after my sophomore year of high school, I did my Engagement. And then there's this like program in the US called Young Arts. And I remember I didn't really know what it was, but my mom made me apply for it. And so I applied for it and I was accepted. And then so when you're accepted, you get to go on this sort of week-long artists retreat sort of thing in Miami. And so was very excited. And I actually like lined up right before COVID hit. So I was the last group that was able to go before the pandemic started and they canceled all the other events. Very grateful for that. But I think like going to like one, just like like the process of like getting selected gives you some confidence like, oh, I've accomplished something, right? But then also going there for that week, like the program is young arts, so it's all like basically high schoolers who are involved in the arts, whether it's like theater, music, dance, painting, or spoken word, film, things like that. And they make a very big, like a very strong emphasis on at least one of the things that I got from that is that there's a strong emphasis on like believing that you are an artist and like thinking of yourself as an artist. Like as a young artist, it's okay to think of yourself as a young artist, but to think of yourself as an artist. Like there are like maybe deficiencies in your technique and there are areas you want to grow, but like being an artist is about that kind of attitude or like mental being in that certain mental space. And I think going there and like learning from all of these, I mean, none of them were Indian classical people. They're all like more in that sort of Western world of art and stuff, but like artists nonetheless. And so going there and hearing their perspective and like listening to all these different ways and paths people have traveled into the art world and their relationship with it, kind of it gave me the confidence to start like thinking of myself as an artist amongst all the other things as you know, am in life, right? And I think in hindsight, I don't think I realized it at the time, but in hindsight, that experience really made me take dance more seriously. And so I'm very grateful
Mm.
for it. That was, I think, the first time that I had to choreograph something because, of course, we're like incorporating different styles. And so you can't really rely too much on the things that have already been done because it has to, you know, be adaptive and it has to be dynamic to what other people are going to do, right? And so that was a very daunting experience. It's still a very daunting experience, but it was the first time, and especially because like I was completely on my own, and so it was a very daunting experience, and I was very glad to have been had the opportunity to do that. But one other thing that I learned from that week is that like working with different styles is a very, very difficult job because I think in order to do it properly, you need to like built up like a deep appreciation into intuition for the other style as well. And of course, I've not been exposed to tap dancing or Mexican folk dancing very much, especially before then. And so there was a lot of like friction in that process and a lot of like learning from each other and like seeing like what kind of movements might work together or what aspects of one form um, like complement other aspects of this form. I'm not saying that, we were the kids, so I'm not saying we did a great job of that, but we like made an attempt, right? And so there was like I remember that week we had a lot of discussion about like how like wearing tap shoes is very similar to gungrus and how we can incorporate those into that into the piece. Once again, I'm not sure how we executed, but it was in the attempt we tried something. One thing is like in Amma's school, we've been because the way she like structures her classes are group classes. And so I've been dancing in a group for many years. Like I was dancing as a group before I was dancing solo. And this is true for many people, but like this is just how Amma school was. And so I had some comfort in doing that. But of course, when everyone is from the same dance school, like even within Bharatanatyam, there's like every dancer will do things different. And especially even like people who learn from different teachers or from different banis or styles will do things, subtle things differently here and there, right? And so I always find that every time that you get to like work with a different group of people or from like a different artists or from different backgrounds, it's always I always find it a very nice experience to like learn as much as you can from them in whatever those like 2 weeks or 3 weeks that you get to spend time with them. And like not that you have to incorporate the like aspects of their style into your dance. You can, I guess, if you want to and you're doing it thoughtfully. But it's more like, I think it's just it's getting to see someone else's art. So like it's very rare that you get to like experience someone else's art up close as you can in a rehearsal while dancing with them. And like I think that that opportunity to do that, it gives you just like a I always like to like take the time subconsciously or sometimes even consciously to think about like what about their dance is like touching me? Like what about it do I find interesting? What do I like? What are the things I can learn from this? And I think every time I get to like dance in a different group or different environment, that's always um a very fun thing. I think playing Merlingam for dance while being a dancer is so much easier than I think doing it from without that dance perspective. Because a lot of playing Merlingam for dance specifically is understanding what is being conveyed and how it's being conveyed. Because then like you need to know that in order to know how to like correctly support that like moment in the dance, right? Like for like in I mean this is a very like obvious example, but like in a Varanam, in like the Pallavi line, if you're there's a sanchari, like a very like quiet, soft sanchari, you have to like understand at the very least you have to understand the story being told, right? And you have to know what's going on in order to accompany and like provide whatever Savarlagas you're playing, or even whatever sort of random strokes to like give effects, whatever you're playing, it has to make sense, right? And I think having that perspective of a dancer makes that process of understanding very easy, much easier than I think it would be had I not. Um, yeah, I do like I mean like in being in the US, you don't get to dance with live music very often, but on
Yeah.
the more recently, the few times I have, I remember like there was one moment in the end of the Telana where at the end of the program where I thought it might be nice if like the Ardi or the Mora that the Mridangist played at the end could match up with the Ardivas that I was doing at the like at the like this kutti like little choreography at the end of the Tilana, just to give like a nice finish to it. And so like I remember in the rehearsal like a few days before the program, we were talking about it. We were working through together maybe what we wanted that to look like. And I feel like having that Mridangam knowledge was invaluable in like coming up with that idea or even thinking to come up with that idea. And so I feel that it's like having learned Mridangam it makes all that communication much easier. I mean, it's a great experience. I should
Yeah,
mention
for
that
sure.
like I don't get to perform on stage with the live orchestra very much, but I'm
Mhm.
very happy. I'm very what's the word? Great. I'm very lucky that my older brother is a fantastic singer. My cousin Anjali is also an outstanding singer, sings a lot for dance, and my brother Aditya is a great mridangist. And so like many times when we're all just hanging out at home, we have little like spontaneous kacheris and that just like bloom. And so like those experiences I do get to like dance with live music in maybe more informal settings, but uh like I'm very grateful that I do get to have that experience quite a lot. And so it's not like something very rare. I mean, I'm still very young, so I'm not at any like
Mhm.
uh I don't have such a large repertoire of varnams to then like
Yeah,
pick and
that's
choose, but
true.
I have learned both like bhakti varnams and Shringara based varnams. And it's not like I think that I mean I think ultimately like both Shringara like the idea of Shringara and the idea of bhakti are all pointing at that at the same thing. And so I think like I don't really see um so much of like a stark difference in them. I mean, perhaps when you're younger, it's easier to relate to like to a bhakti varnam or to relate to the themes in that because it's just it's very like similar to I guess the kind of devotion that your parents are telling you to that your parents and other people in your community will preach. But I think like the Shringara Varnams and Shringara Bhakti are an equally uh, I think like they achieve the same thing as
Mm.
a Bhakti Varnam. It's actually interesting that I have two stories about this.
Okay.
One, so the first time that I like learned a sort of Shringara based item, or that's like explicitly Shringara based, as you grow older, you find out that some of these like very like these like Radha Venu Gopa is like a Shringara based like
Yeah.
you realize that, but like the first time I learned like a Javali was I had gotten some like dance scholarship thing, and I had to use it on on this workshop. And the work, I mean, I say I had to, I got to use it in this workshop. Because Priyanti was teaching a workshop, and so like so I signed up for it, and then they put me with all the aunties who are learning, right? And so the first like 2 days they were Auntie Priyanti was teaching like this Mallari. So I learned the Mallari, and it was like me and a bunch of aunties. And then so when I was like 15, so like very energetic and stuff. And then some of the aunties were like, they're like getting tired. And so I was like, okay, yes, I'm feeling good. I'm able to do it, right? And then like the third day we walked into the workshop and everyone was sitting down with books in their hand, and I was so confused. I'm like, what is going on right now? Are we not about to just like, do a different another Manlari or something? Um, and then so she started teaching Vagaladi Bodhana Vadachitiyo Sami. It's about this Nayaka whose beloved has been unfaithful and is coming back to her after a night of being with this other woman. And so she's very upset, right? And so she starts teaching this Javali, and I think she must have been maybe she was aware that I was very nervous and awkward about doing this, but and in hindsight, it's very funny, but I was like, I was terrified because I thought it was just the most uncomfortable experience. And like at some point, like she was like everyone was doing elaborations on the line, like someone like I think the Anupallavi is like saying like oh is like describing this other woman as like almost a snake that's stolen your heart, and now look what he's turned you in. She's turned you into. She's saying to this man, and so everyone's like, oh look, it's like the bee going to the Venus flytrap, and then it kills, and like all those nice things like that. And then
Yeah.
so Brianti wanted everyone to come up with their own version of the line. And so all these aunties were like coming up with their own version of the line, but they were also like telling personal experiences and like talking about it and like this man back in 1930, all these things, right? And I was like 15. I was like, oh my God,
So
is it
funny.
my turn now? And then Priyanti came and so Shashank, what what are your thoughts on this? And I was like, I've, I don't think I said anything. I was just quiet and I didn't
So
answer anything, and
funny.
she eventually moved on. But yes, so at first it was very awkward, but I got over it at some point. It's interesting you say that because my favorite Varnam is Swami Nana the Nadime, the Natakaranji Varnam. Because I mean my favorite Varnam because I love the ragam, I love the composition, and I love the CVC Sir's choreography, which is the one that I perform. Um, but like and another reason I really love it is because it's like I think like Amma learned it from CBC Sir like 30 years ago or something, and then she taught it to me, and there's like some there's like I feel like a nice connection with it. Anyways, so that Varnam, like in CBC Sir's choreography, at least from what I can tell, is that it's not explicitly a Nayaka who is the main character of the Varnam, right? And I didn't really think too much of it. I don't know Tamil, and so I didn't like. I mean, at least I know a little bit of Tamil now, but I didn't really know Tamil when I learned it, and so I didn't like think too much about the whether the lyrics were hinting at whether this is a woman or a man, or I just imagine it as this sort of generic bhakta, right? But then as I grew older and I see other choreographies or other interpretations of this Varnam, I started noticing that like it seems that a lot of other choreographies are very um explicitly taught like portraying this character as a woman or as like is it being Shringara based, right? And I think that like a few of the lines, especially in the Charanam, are even like more like explicitly suggest that. And I'm saying all this because like your question just reminded me of this because I think like I mean sometimes it's very explicit whether the Varnam is about primarily about Shingara or about bhakti or like whatever you want whatever terms you want to use, but I think it's oftentimes like interesting that it is not so clear what it would be, and I think like you can take that sort of liberty to like interpret it how you want to, as CVC Sir did in Swaminathan Anime. Yeah, that's a very interesting question. So so CVC Sir when maybe like 10, 12, 13 years ago when was very young, would often whenever we would come to the US or come to Dallas, he would always stay at our house. And I remember like when you're young, you don't really know who people are, and so you just behave however you would behave, right? And so I think I remember like two like anecdotes I remember is that Aditya, my older brother, he was also very young. I think he was CBC Sir was there, and of course we didn't realize who. I mean, we know who CBC Sir is, Sama's guru, but I think we didn't realize the like um how important or how like uh, creative a dancer and an artist of a human being was there that day or in our house that week. And so we just knew that, like a dancer is here, right? Or Amma's guru is here. And so Aditya was very excited and he wanted to show his interpretation of Hiranyakashipu. And then so I was just sitting on the couch. I might have been like four or something, and he grabbed me and he just turns me and he puts me on his knee, like you know how the standard way of doing it. And he starts doing it. There's like a video of this, and it's very we're like dancing terribly because we're children, but I remember that being like when I was very younger there was like this sort of anecdotal experiences like that whenever he would come to Dallas, and And like also whenever he would come to Dallas, he would teach workshops with my students, and I was too young to like participate properly, but I would sit in the corner and watch. But by the time that I had I think by the time that I had like grown up to an age where I could like appreciate um like CBC Sir's like in person as an artist and as a dancer, and I think at that time he was already getting too old, and so I was never able to like have um maybe like a sort of one like a personal teaching relationship of that kind. But I think it was interesting you were saying that like what things have I learned through Amma. I think well one like frankly a lot of the obvious thing is a lot of the compositions Amma teaches are a lot of Xavier Caesar's compositions, and also a lot of the way in which she teaches and like the a lot of the things she says are things that she'd heard from CBC Sarah. But I think one of the interesting things that I've like started to feel recently is when I'm like doing Sir's items, and that they're like little moments. Like actually, just this morning I was doing Natakranjivarnam, and they're like always little moments of like that. Like so I learned the Natakranjivarnam. I learned it when I was like in high school. I was in like 10th grade, and so like and every time you like you pick it up again, you appreciate some new element of it, right? And so I feel like every time I pick up dance one of CBC Sir's pieces, there's always one small moment or something that I like appreciate or like something new that I get out of it. And I feel like it's just those moments of like having some connection to the choreographer and to Sir, I think are always very special. I don't know if I have like a process right now. I'm sure that would be a very nice thing to have, but like to work on the house. But I feel like whenever I'm choreographing or like have to like come up with something on my own, um, I like oftentimes I feel like I'm very influenced by by Shridhana from like learning with Shridhana and like watching him dance and his art and his dance for the past many years. And so I often find myself influenced by that, but then also every time that I have to do something, I like once again back to the first question, my mom is my guru, so like she's always a phone call away, and so I'll always like have to like FaceTime her or something to get her opinions and thoughts. And sometimes we disagree and sometimes we agree, but it's usually a healthy discussion that happens. That's always very useful. And so Anna had been coming to like he's been coming to Dallas and like teaching with Amma's students for many years. And so I've known him for a while and I've been learning items and every once a year whenever he would come or something for many years. But then I think about like a year ago and when in college when I started taking dance more seriously and I was like away from home, so it's much harder to like take classes with Amma. Um, that's when I started like we reached out and I thought we could also take like one-on-one classes with Shirtana. And so that started about a year ago. I like one like definitely one new thing. Not like one new thing over the past like few months and years that I've like started to think about more in my dance. It's like having more of like an introspective look of how of like personally how I want it to look and um how I like finding those ways of like maybe like maybe is a weird way of phrasing, but have like an internal gaze or like an idea of what you look like as a dancer, and having and working on fixing that and correcting those things and on your like on your own, or like finding ways to be
Yeah.
more independent in that way. Um, and then aside from that, I think it's I think it's always very interesting just to hear Anna's perspective on dance and art, and every single time I get to hear about that, it's always very impactful and interesting, and those little nuggets here and there I keep with me. So the piece that I'll be presenting is like a sort of slightly elaborated version of an item that I had presented earlier this year. And so for that program, uh, I wanted, I guess for this program, for this piece, I wanted to do something on Dakshinamurti, which is this. It's a the form of Shiva that that in contrast to Nataraja is not this like sort of very loud and bombastic dancer, but is instead the form of Shiva that preaches through silence and through meditation and through quiet. And so it's like contrasted to Nataraja in that way. And so like in Bharatanatyam, at least in all these in dance, we like obviously for obvious reasons we celebrate Nataraja as this Lord of dance. Um, but I thought it's interesting that there's also other forms of Shiva, and like and Dakshinamurti being one of them, that it's a very different version of Shiva than we normally experience in dance. So I wanted to do something along those lines in like this piece. And so the idea I had originally, and for the original item, which has now been elaborated, is that there's this character, the Shiva Bhakta, who sees a procession coming, and like many of the Nayakas or characters in lots of Varnams and compositions, he's all he's wanted is to receive the darshan of Shiva's dance, of watching Shiva's dance. And so he sees this procession coming, and then he decides, oh, this is very exciting. If I follow them, um, I'll get to see Shiva's dance finally. And so he goes, and the procession is set to this tune of a Mallari. It's composed by a violinist in Houston, Abhishek, lovely guy, and a great composer, great musician. And at the end of the procession, instead of seeing Nataraja, he sees a banyan tree. And a banyan tree is a very important part of the iconography of Dakshinamurti, and so that's why. So he sees a banyan tree instead of seeing Nataraja, and is a little confused, but undeterred, he still questions to the banyan tree about asking him to dance. Banyan tree stays still, and he gets angry, and he goes off to the side, and he goes off, and he's upset with Shiva because Shiva is not dancing for him. And then so finally there's like a little twist at the end where the banyan tree sort of reveals to him that there's other ways of experiencing the divine, right? And so that was the original piece. In order to make it more about the Nayaka and less about a piece of Dakshinamurti, I've elaborated the beginning to establish this character as more of a sort of boastful, like arrogant, almost arrogant Shiva Bhakta, like similar to how maybe some depictions of I know like some depictions of Ravana are of this like very arrogant like um shit like arrogant in the greatness of his devotion to Shiva, and that's how he gets his boons,
Mm.
right? And so like a similar character to that who believes that he is like, a better devotee than anyone else, who believes that he knows exactly what Shiva is and who Shiva is and how we should be devoted to him, and that we should be devoted to him in his form of Nataraja, and that is the only version that is worthwhile, right? And so he's like, very confident in this belief, and he goes out. And so this fits very nicely with we've been talking about this Varnam all day, but Natakranji Varnam, right? Because of the first line, Swami Nandu Nadime, Yendru Ulagam Ellam Ariyume. Like the normal interpretation of that is that, Swami, I am your servant, and everyone knows this. but another way of saying everyone knows this is that like I'm like everyone knows that I'm a better devotee than them, right? Not that this is like what was intended in the lyric, but there's you can I feel like you can find that interpretation there. And then so I was in order to like so I've taken just the pallavi and anupallavi of the Varnam and I'm using a few lines from there to establish this character in this way and then moving in to the Mallari and the rest of the piece after that. So that's sort of the arc. I don't know if it was a moment that I realized this, but I know now that I'm very happy just having the opportunity to dance, and that I know that if I like on a given day, if I get to dance, whether like because I have the time or if I wasn't lazy that day or something, I always feel better after that. And actually, you know what? One thing that this is not my line at all. I'm stealing this from I heard Malvika Sarukai speak once. She was giving some talk, and she said that one of the things that like keeps her um, motivated is that in every single practice she does, if she can find one thing that she really liked, like that's all she needed. That's all she needs is one thing that she really liked from that day's like engagement with dance, right? And I feel like um maybe I had felt that way before, but like definitely hearing that gave word like language to what I was feeling. And so like I really like to like think about my engagement with dance in with that perspective of like if any day that I dance or practice, as long as like it's like obviously you'll do better some days and do worse some days, and some days it'll be really bad and you'll be like kind of just not motivated. But like if you can if I find one thing in each like time that I dance that I really liked that time, like some new idea, or like even it's the same movement but you felt differently inside when I was doing it, or whatever it may be, if I find that one thing each day, that's what I like. That's what I'd like to keep doing. Yeah, I think I have like two kind of like answers to this question that are kind of very different. One of
Okay.
them more the question, one of them is just a nice idea that I thought I'd say. Uh, one I'll say one like very important person is my brother Aditya. Because like I mean also my mom, but like Aditya specifically because I think especially when you're younger and you're a male dancer, I think maybe especially in the US, I'm not exactly sure how it is in India, but like you're like I remember when Aditya and I were younger, we were definitely like one of two, like we were the only male dancers in Dallas that I was aware of at that time, right? And definitely the only male dancers in Dallas our age. And so there's like a lot of uh judgment that comes from that, both like internally and externally, mainly internally, frankly. I think like my experience is that people are kinder these days than maybe they were 20 to 30, 20 years ago. But there's like a lot of like self-consciousness that like that comes from like being a boy who like dances, right? Especially when you're younger. And I feel that having my older brother who is also a dancer, maybe go through all of those things a few years before I did was very helpful. And then it made it very easy for me to not have to deal with much, right? And so I feel like it made that like process easier for me. So I think that was very 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 important. Um, Another side to the question, which is completely maybe a little bit of a tangent, that this your question reminded me of is I remember like you were saying like it's important for young dancers or artists to like have things to aspire to, right? And so I remember my mridangam teacher, he would always he would always say that like whenever we were learning a particular stroke or a particular phrase, you should have like a database in your head of like a reference of some, great mridangist who you're trying to aspire to, of like that like you should as in like you should listen to so many of these recordings, and like you should listen to the recording so specifically and with such intention that every single time you come in and you play a num or a din, or your gumki or some other sarvalagu phrase, you should know exactly what you're trying to aspire to, like exactly what reference you're trying to aspire to. And I think that that idea applies to like every,
Mm,
at least every single like performing art that you're gonna like engage with. That like in dance, every movement, every article, every like abhinaya thing that you're trying to do, you should have some reference in your mind of of who you've of like whether it's your teacher, whether it's someone you saw, of like who you saw doing this and what they how they were able to achieve it. You have to understand how they were able to achieve it and then like aspire to
mm.
achieve that. And so I think
Yeah,
like
exactly.
oftentimes like specific movements and stuff are like, okay, this I remember I really like the way Bhavachan did this. Let me see if I can let me see if I
Yeah.
can try and like replicate that, right? I think for a while you like and I'm definitely still in this phase, like you like will try and like copy and like mimic other like like very popular dancers and artists, and then at some point you will be able to build like create your own voice, your own style, right? But I think that process of like identifying what you really like and what and then trying to aspire to that and just having that in your head is very important. Maybe a few years ago would have thought that there would be something like that. But I think over
Mhm.
the past few years, I've started to make lots of like friends and like acquaintances
Mhm.
with dancers who have grown up in India and have like learned in India. And I think maybe it just because like these days everything's so globalized, and so I think people have
That's
a
true.
better understanding of what's going on, across the pond, so to
Okay.
speak. That like I really haven't like even if like maybe some of our perspectives on um like in terms of like what languages we speak or like the slang we use or like the how we imagine our lives to look like are different. We're all connected by dance, and I think and like it's not hard uh to engage with them in this in dance. I don't really see much of a barrier there. I feel like like dancing and like music and like all of these like arts that we engage in to me feel very similar and like indistinguishable from engaging with religion, especially in like the Hindu tradition. And so um I haven't thought so deeply about it to know or like to like publicly say if that's how I feel.
Yeah, yeah.
But I almost feel like dance and music and poetry and like reading poetry and like through dance like dancing poetry is like it's like a very it's a very like it's like a religious experience almost like it's like akin um to like going to the temple or like doing things
Mhm.
like that. So maybe that's one that's that might be what my perspective is. I haven't thought so hard about it to like know for sure, but I like to think that I'd like to think that's how I feel. Yeah. Like in terms of your engagement with religion, everyone talks about it being this higher thing that you pay attention to, and it's about like paying that attention or like believing in something, right? Or like believing the power of something, and like you can believe in like whatever that it may be, as long as you're doing it and doing it in like a healthy way that's respectful of other people. I think you need that in life, and right, like, and that thing it can be God, it can be music, or like, or it can be art, it can be whatever, right? But like, and I think like dance and poetry and music are it's like a thing greater than yourself that you can like focus your attention on. And I feel like what is like religion if not that, right?
பணிந்திடும் நடராஜமூர்த்தி பழியத்தனை நான் செய்யணும்.